Thank you and welcome to the Dallas Public Library. Today, we are offering a session of question and answer period with the League of Women Voters. And if you have any questions today, we hope that you will be sure and send them in to us. Otherwise, I'm going to introduce Barbara Larkin. Oh, and incidentally, this program is being recorded and it does have titles for you to read. So, Barbara, would you mind taking it away?
Thank you, Kathy. Hi, my name is Barbara Larkin, and I am the VP of Voter Services with the League of Women Voters of Dallas. And my vision for today is to talk a little bit about the elections that are going on in May, primarily, and to let you understand, what you're voting on in May and how to get ready to vote, essentially. I'm going to try to share my screen. If that doesn't work, then I'll just talk.
All right. We see your screen.
What do you see?
Zoom United.
Do you see that?
There we go. There's your presentation.
Okay. And if I go like that, does that work?
Yes, that works.
Okay. Woo!
Woo.
It's always a mystery for me every time. Okay, so a guide to voting in May. Okay, so I actually started with this because I just why vote, why not vote, and then I'll get to more of the May. Is because we hear a lot of people saying, should I vote? Why should I vote? And one of the reasons that I always want people to remember is that you have representatives whether you vote or not. They're still out there thinking they're working on your behalf, doing things either locally or county-wide or statewide or US. You have them. They're out there whittling away, trying to, affect policy. And so my thought on voting is it's important because you basically have representatives, so you might as well go give it a shot and try to figure out who's the one that most closely matches your, objectives for the country and the state and the local. And so you might as well give it a shot. That's what I always feel like it's worth it to spend the half an hour it takes to vote when they come up. Texas still has some of the lowest voting rates in the country. And so, we at the League of Women Voters are always trying to make that better. We always want more people to vote. So even in our best ever was 11 million Texans out of 17 million registered. That was in November of 2020. And still 11 out of 17 leaves 6 million people not voting. So I'm always here to say, please go vote. Young people are, they're voting more, but they're still not voting nearly as close as elderly people. So if you're watching a library presentation, you might be a little bit older, is my guess. If you know young people and you can encourage them to vote, please do. We are out all the time on, high school and college campuses, and occasionally we're talking to people and we'll say, well, do you need text reminders about voting? And they'll say, oh, no, my grandma tells me when to vote. And so we're always happy for the grandmoms of the world to keep pushing on the young people and letting them know when there's an election. So what's going on in May? So the first thing is Saturday, May 7th, is basically this is nonpartisan city races, including school board races. There are city council races in different, not in Dallas City, but in some of the other cities around in the county have city council races. There is the Dallas College Trustees, Dallas College Trustee 1, 2, and 3. All have races going on, and there's the Texas constitutional amendments. So there are kind of 4 buckets, and depending on where you live, that's how it's determined what's on your ballot. Those are the different possibilities of things you'll have on your ballot. And I'll come back to how you figure that out. And then on Tuesday, May 24th, the runoffs for the Democratic and Republican primaries for the November election are happening. So as you recall, March 1st, there was the first round of the primary, and that had, if you don't get up to 50% in that race, so in certain races, there was a lot of people on the ballot, it would have been very hard to get 50%. all of those races have a runoff. And so that's for the Democratic Republican primary. I don't know if you, like the Libertarians and Independent, those people get on the ballot through usually through petition. So they come straight from a petition to November. But in the Democratic and Republican races, they have a primary system. And so this is the runoff to the primary system. And so certain races in May 24th will be very interesting. If you happen to be living in U.S. Congressional District 30, that is Eddie Bernice Johnson is retiring. There are 2 people on the Democratic side and 2 people on the Republican side. That's been a very exciting race. A lot of people were in the original primary, and it whittles in a runoff always has 2 people. So I mean, if you happen to live in that district, you've got a lot going on. There's certain races there in that May 24th race. There's state Senate, state House races. There's certain ones that are very kind of exciting. So this is the thing where you have to look up, like, you know, who's on my ballot. And so I'll talk about that. If anybody has questions in the chat, Kathy, feel free to interrupt me. Okay. So, and then on the constitutional amendments, there are 2 constitutional amendments. The first, Proposition 1, is essentially trying to lower the property taxes for elderly or disabled homeowners. It's a long, very it's confusing. For some reason, when the legislature writes these constitutional amendments, they always make them long and complicated. But that's essentially what it's trying to do. And then Proposition 2 is lowering homeowners' school property tax by increasing the market value, a deduction that they get to take off their school property tax. And that's, so that should also lower property taxes. And I highly recommend that, okay, in our case, I should back up and say the League of Women Voters actually is organized locally. I'm the local league. There's also a Texas league, there's state leagues, and then there's the US league. But so the person who kind of does the most research on state constitutional amendments is the state league. So LWV Texas is the one who does videos, and they have, if you just go to that website, they have videos that explain it. They have an entire write-up that explains it in very long detail, all about the constitutional amendments. So I highly recommend going to lwvtexas.org and just clicking on the constitutional amendments and watching their videos. They're about 1.5 minutes each. So I think that would be the first thing to do on those. Typically in Texas, lowering property taxes is a win. Most people are happy with that. So these will probably, pass, would be my guess. Okay, the voting process, I always want to back up a little bit because there's steps to the voting process, and it just has to make sure we have a lot of people that have had issues. So the first is to register to vote. Check if you're registered, because in Texas, if you have moved, sometimes you get removed from the voter rolls because they want you to vote from the house that you live in, and they want you to vote for the correct representatives. So you can see how if you moved, you might have just changed which representatives you're voting for. And that is, the county does not want you to do that. So you always have to keep checking if you're registered. The card that showed up, it showed up in January, confirming that your registration was blue this time. It's in the past, it's been yellow and orange, and they mail it out every 2 years. Well, so if you didn't get that blue card in the mail, you need to check if you're registered. So that's the second step. The third one is, I always say, to research who your current representatives are. I think that's an important part of voting, is knowing who currently represents me. Because we definitely find a lot of young people that don't, and everyone who are like, well, I'm not really sure who my representatives are right now. Well, it's nice to know who they currently are, because that informs your decision making. And then research who will be on your ballot. And I'm going to talk more about that. Research where and when you want to vote. I always recommend early voting. So for this, on May 7th, early voting actually starts on Monday, on April 25th. So early voting will be April 25th to Tuesday, May 3rd. In Texas, there's always a break between Election Day. In this case, Election Day is Saturday, May 7th for all the city, school, local elections, Saturday, May 7th. And early voting is Monday, April 25th to Tuesday, May 3rd. So I always support early voting. My experience is that occasionally someone will have an issue. You get there, what if you're not in their system for some reason, or they can't find you, or somehow you didn't bring the correct ID? Then you can actually go home and figure it out and come back. If you vote on election day, you just have less leeway to fix an issue. So I know some people love to vote on election day. I just always tell people, please early vote. And then for the Tuesday, May 24th runoff, which is the partisan runoff for the congressional races and the Texas Senate and Texas House, the early voting dates on that one are Monday, May 16th, and it runs to Friday, May 20th. So it is just 1 week, Monday through Friday of the week before that election. And that election's on a Tuesday. So, it's trying to keep up with this is a little bit complicated, I would just say. Let's see. Okay, so, and then make a plan to vote, in terms of, I always think once you do the research, kind of write down what you think you're going to do, and then go either vote by mail or vote in person. And I'll talk a little bit, I don't know if I did a slide, but I will talk a little bit about the changes in the vote by mail process. Texas had a 12% rejection rate on vote by mail ballots in this last race, which was unfortunate. And, those people were registered to vote, so they were eligible to vote. And they've changed, I'll just mention it now, they have changed how you have to write down your ID numbers. You have to write them in the application for the mail ballot, and then you have to write them on what's called the carrier envelope. So when you actually get the ballot in the mail, you're going to vote it, you put it in an envelope, and then you put it in this outer envelope that's called the carrier envelope, and you have to put both your ID, you really should put both your IDs on that carrier envelope, because the way the law was written was they're trying to figure out what's in your voter registration file. So the more ID numbers you put on that carrier envelope, the better odds you have that they've got that number on you. So we really want people to know if they're going to vote by mail, to remember to put all their ID information on the application, and then put all their ID information on what's called the carrier envelope. Those are the most important things. That was the big reason in Dallas County, we've talked to them, that that ballots got rejected. So let's see, let's keep going. Just quickly to check if you're registered, if you are in Dallas County, we recommend Dallas County Votes. And if not, we recommend votetexas.gov is the state site, so you can always go in there. Dallas County Votes has a very easy system where you go to voter lookup. And I highly recommend this for anybody that lives in Dallas County, to go to Dallas County DallasCountyVotes.org, go to voter lookup and look yourself up. And then when you do that, the interesting thing is if you are registered, it'll tell you, active, and if it says something like suspense, that means you might have moved and you need to update it. But if it says active, then it gives you links. It gives you a link to who are my representatives. It gives you links to what's on my ballot, a PDF picture of what's on the ballot. It's got a lot of cool things in there if you're in the system. So we highly recommend to periodically go look yourself up. If you aren't registered, if there's anyone out there watching this and there's not registered, you can either get someone, like if you go to a voter drive, like people like me are out and about, we register you, or you can go to the Dallas County office and register, or there is a slower method online where you go to registertovote.org and you can start it online, and then what happens is they mail you the form and you mail it back. So it's a little bit slower, but if you don't have the ability to go to the county office or find a voter registration drive, this is a good option. Okay, there's, plenty of ways to register. There's white forms and green forms. There's a lot of in-person. I'm not going to go into that today. But in general, you can also, the county office, by the way, is at 1520 Round Table Drive. If you have access to a car, running over there is a great way to get a lot of things done, including registering to vote. Okay, so getting ready to vote is important. Looking up who is on your ballot is one of the most important parts of the process, because it helps to research who's on my ballot. And this one especially, because a lot of these races, especially like May 7th, it's going to be the city, like who's on your ballot from a city standpoint, and then which runoffs in May 24th. So like I always say, go, look up your ballot. And then Vote 411 is a website that the National League of Women Voters and the state and the local all work on together. So it is a website where people write the questions. So for example, I'm one of the question writers for this Vote 411 and for the voter guide. This is Vote 411 is sort of the digital version of the League of Women Voters voter guide, if you're familiar with that. And so this is somewhere where you can go and look up questions that have been asked of candidates. So it'll be like, we try to make, we'll write questions for a school board race. So, tell us about, what you think is the most important piece of, what you do. And then we write separate questions for city council, and we write questions for state House and state Senate, and then we write questions for US Congress. So we write the questions that are geared to the race, and then we ask candidates that, and we do not edit it at all. We just stick what they say right into that digital voter guide. It's also in the printed voter guide. We do, depending on what's going on, printed voter guides are expensive. And so sometimes we did 10,000 for the November election, but then sometimes we're doing less printed guides for this election. We do have printed guides. We did local printed guides. So for example, the city, Lancaster and Bald Springs, and different places that have city council elections, we did printed voter guides that were just for them. So, and they're being distributed in that area. So we're trying to get to the people that need the information. Okay. So this was okay. Then just in terms of getting ready to vote, just so you can, Dallas County has vote centers, which is the term that means we don't have the old style precinct voting. That means you can go anywhere in Dallas County. If you live in Dallas County, you can vote at any location in Dallas County. Tarrant also has the same thing, so does Collin. So that means when they invented vote centers in 2019, I believe, about half of the people started voting in a spot different than their old precinct location, which was by their house. So a lot of people vote somewhere else. They vote by their office or by their grocery store, or they vote once they're doing errands. So it's about, it's been very popular for people to be able to vote at any location in Dallas County. So, you got to look up where the vote centers are, and the hours. And I didn't actually bring the hours today, but I can look them up. But they are on Dallas County Votes. What the hours, typically the hours are either 8 to 5 or 7 to 7 during early voting. And then during election day, they're always 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So pretty much the hours are pretty consistent. You have to know. And then Sundays often are just afternoons. And Sundays, by the way, are a great day to vote, because most people don't know that voting happens on Sundays. So I often vote on Sundays, or sometimes I vote when it rains, because no one votes when it rains. So I just slosh in with my umbrella and vote in the rain. I voted in the ice storm on the Wednesday of early voting for the March primary. I voted in the ice storm. So there was all of us walking through with our galoshes and things. Let's see. Okay, so voting, I was mentioning early voting. I mentioned that yeah, this is pretty much all the things you need to know to vote early. Early voting hours, early voting days, check Dallas County votes, bring your vote for one research. If you have any issues at the poll, there's a nonpartisan website called 1866 Our Vote. And it's staffed by lawyers who know all the voting laws. If you show up to vote and you have an issue, you can't pull your phone out in the polling location, but you can walk outside and call and say, hey, something's wrong, and they will usually help you figure out what to do. Okay, I mentioned that already. Vote centers. Okay, I'm just making a slight plug for becoming a poll worker, because Dallas County did recently agree to, they have about approximately 450 polling locations, and they have actually more during election day. And they recently made a decision to close 39 of those locations because they just are having shortages of poll workers. It's a combination of things. It's the state legislature has made it more complicated to be a poll worker, and there's just shortages of labor, and it's a hard job. It's interesting, and I do it about every second or third election. I go do it just to stay in the loop. I always find it very interesting and gratifying in some ways, but you know, I recommend it. If you go to Dallas County Votes and click on there, become a poll worker, you can either work early voting or you can work election day, and they need people. And if you happen to speak Spanish, the bilingual judges make a lot more money. So they make like $20 an hour or more. So it's good to, you can make some pretty good money. Let's see. I won't go into the whole training. Helping register voters. Yeah, this is just, if you want to get involved in the process, register voters. We have flyers always, but we're always passing out flyers. Helping others look up their voter registration status and looking up their sample ballot. I think that's important because those are the really cruxes of the process. Getting to know your representatives, helping other people, children, grandchildren, know who their representatives are, and then encouraging voting from a social media standpoint. And I think that's it. If you have questions, by the way, I should mention this, League of Women Voters of Dallas, we occasionally do hotlines, but we don't always have a hotline going, but we always answer questions on our, what we do is if you call our League of Women Voters of Dallas, and we always say, we have a system where you leave a message, a voicemail message, and the voicemail message gets taped and sent to a bunch of us who answer the questions. So literally I will get a question, I'll click on my email and I can hear the voicemail of whoever's calling in, and I call them back. But there's about 5 or 6 of us that do that regularly. So if you have a question, you just call, leave the message, I'll hear it. People like me will hear it and we'll call you back. And so usually you get a call back in a couple hours, and we'll help you work through, because usually some of these voting issues are a little complicated. They're not quite, so it helps if we call you back and then we talk through what the issue is. So we're always willing to do that. And, it's important. So, okay, I think that's it. So if I want to stop sharing, how do I stop sharing? Do you know? Stop share. Oh, there we go. All right, let me see if, I'm going to look at Alicia Deal's questions. Yeah, okay, so I occasionally people do not answer the questions in League of Women Voters. We actually had a 90% return rate on candidates in the last election. So we had a 90, somebody's basically saying, what if one of your candidates has not answered the questions in the Vote for 101 website? There are not a lot of other places. The Dallas Morning News does do, they do some, they don't quite do questions the way they do, but they do recommendations on candidates. So they assess it from their standpoint and do recommendations. We are the only ones I know of that actually just ask the questions and enter them with no editing. And we had a 90% rate on candidates responding. We actually have been going through some system changes. And so some people were having technical issues. Some people just got busy and didn't do it, but some people had technical issues. So we're hoping, we're working, trying to work through that we don't, because for us, the most important thing is we'd really like to have 100% candidates respond. I know, like, for example, in this Dallas College trustee race, I was just passing out the voters guides. Everybody responded. So we had a really good showing of that. So, mostly the candidates do respond, and mostly they're in the Vote for 111 and the voters guide. Okay, her second question is, I am deaf, use speech to text app on my phone to communicate. Would be thrown out or barred from voting if I brought my phone to use an assistant device? That's an excellent question. And I'll read it. I'm deaf and use a speech app speech to text app. That's what it is. On my phone to communicate. Would I be thrown out or barred from voting if I brought my phone to use an assisted device? I do not know the answer to that, but I will find out the answer to that. The most of voting is visual. The beginning of the process is where you have to check in. That there is some hearing needed in that part of the process. Once you get checked in, it's all very much the screen, everything is in words, you pushing on the screen. It's the instructions part that I think could cause problems. So I'll look into that. My guess is that if you explained that or had something where you could explain it to the clerk when you walk in, that it would be fine. But the reason that they don't allow phones in polling locations, your phone's out, you can have it in your pocket or your purse, phone's out, is because they don't want people to either purposely or accidentally take photos of someone else voting, so that they can, you can and see what someone else is voting on, and they really just don't want to deal with that. So that is the logic behind that. The logic is not to prevent someone from being able to understand the instructions. So, but I'll look into that, and that's a good question.
Barbara.
Yes.
Question.
Mm-hmm.
I was out in March with a medical problem, and I wasn't able to vote in the March primary.
Mm-hmm.
How does that affect me whenever I get ready to go vote in May?
Okay, so it's the way the primary system works is that the March primary, if you voted in the Democratic primary in March, then you have to vote in the Democratic runoff. If you voted in the Republican primary in March, you have to vote in the Republican runoff. If you didn't vote in the March primary, you can vote in either runoff, because the whole point of the thing is it wants you to sort of stay in a lane during that voting cycle. So you can vote in either in the runoff, and then it doesn't affect you at all in November. So in November, it doesn't matter what you did in this March 1, May 24th cycle, you can vote for anybody you want in November. So it shouldn't, you can do from here on, because you didn't vote in March. If you had voted in March, then you would have to pick the runoff of the same party that you had voted in March. But since you didn't, you're free. You can do whatever you want.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions?
Any more?
Well, I know that you mentioned that the younger voters, I have a daughter that's almost 40 and one that's 35 or 36. And they say, well, one votes, one doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
The one that doesn't says, well, I don't want to be called for jury duty. Is that a myth or a fact? If you sign up to register to vote, you'll be called?
which is interesting because I did just get called for jury duty. I was horrified. I actually am not sure of the answer of that. I had thought that it was not related, but I think it's possible that it is related. And I need to find out. But I think it's a possibility that that is one of the sources the jury folks use. So I think it is possible that it might get you called for jury duty. To me, if you have reasons to get out of jury duty, it's pretty easy to get out of jury duty. If you have, like when I had young children, there's a box that says I have young children. And, there's a variety of ways that if you're too busy, that you can get out of jury duty. My thought is that voting is worth it. It's just so much more important to have a say in who your representatives are. And if you get called for jury duty, once every 5 years, most of the time when people get called for jury duty, at least in Texas, you're in there for one day, even sometimes a half a day, and then you're done. So it's pretty speedy.
All righty. Well, we have another question.
Yeah.
The previous registration card that they had expired, and when they looked it up online, it indicated they were still able to vote. Yet, they had not received the new registration card until right before the primary.
Mm-hmm.
I was so worried that the website had made a mistake. Are you aware of how long it takes to get a registration card?
They had trouble. Okay, so I forgot that y'all had asked me about redistricting. That normally those cards go out very promptly in January of odd even years. And this year they had some issues with redistricting. So the cards were late. And certain people that were had multiple redistricting events affect their districts, those people got them late. So that could be what happened in this case. It just took them a little while. So you don't need that voter registration card to vote. It is essentially informational unless you have some kind of big issue. If you get there and somehow you're not in the poll book for some reason, occasionally we have seen situations where someone shows them the voter registration card, and the election judge will literally get on the phone and try to solve the problem, which sometimes is a time-consuming thing. So 99% of the time, you don't need that voter registration card to vote unless there's an issue. So I always say, doesn't hurt to bring it, hang on to it. And that's another reason to early vote, is because if you early vote and there's some issue, you can run home, get that card, come back and say, okay, look, I am registered. Because there have been issues. So in terms of redistricting, by the way, redistricting is something that is done by the state legislature did the U.S. congressional districts and the state districts. Okay, so they did that. And then the county commissioners did their own redistricting. They did it in 2 weeks. It's very quick. The city of Dallas is currently in the process of working on the city of Dallas doesn't have city council elections until next year in May. So they are currently working on the redistricting for city council. So different bodies did redistricting at different times. Okay. So it's one of the things that I think it's confusing, is that you had different people redistricting at different times. Most of this, it relates to the census. The census came in, the 2020 census came in a little late because of COVID. That slowed things down. So there was there was just a lot of confusion around that. But right, we're almost, once City of Dallas gets its redistricting done, then most of the redistricting will be done. And then you have 10 more years until, you have to go through that again. Let's see. Have there been any other consequences due to the new laws beyond the impact it had on mail-in voting and redistricting? It did seem to have a little bit of a chilling effect on poll workers, because they made if a poll worker makes a mistake, there's some, there's ways that they could be accused of something and have criminal liability. That seems to have cut down on poll workers, because they're pretty much all around the state, they're having issues getting poll workers. So I think that was, beside mail-in voting was the biggest thing that came through in the legislature, adding all those ID requirements. They changed the application. That actually had really big impact about in the beginning. And the other thing that the legislature did was it made it where the county elections office is not allowed to what they call solicit mail balloting, which means they're not allowed to send out the application. They used to always send out the application to people that had voted, were over 65. They know you're over 65. They know you're eligible. They used to always send out the application. So, and the way the application works, by the way, I mean, you can get 10 applications because other organizations could send you an application. It's not a part of the integrity of the process. Basically, once you fill out a vote by mail application and you send it back, then they cross you off the list. They go, okay, this person's on the list to get a ballot. And so, and if you send in another application because you got a second one and you were worried, then they go look and they go, okay, well, she's already on the list for the ballot. They don't send you 2 ballots. You know what I mean? So sometimes people get confused. I got 2 applications and that's even probably going to get worse, because it used to be Dallas County sent out the applications for a mail ballot, and now organizations send it out. And so people, because Dallas County didn't send out the applications for mail ballot, organizations did. Some of them didn't know and sent out, like, we know churches and synagogues and people that were trying to get ahead of it and be helpful sent out an old application. So then all these folks turned in the old application, and that didn't work because the old application didn't have the ID requirement on it. So anyways, there was this particular round, I think, was difficult, and that there are some parts of the consequences of these new voting laws that I think people are working through. They seem to be learning from them. I don't think people will send out the old vote by mail application. They now have all figured out not to do that. And that I think more people are hearing that you need to put your IDs both on the vote by mail application and on the envelope when you turn in your ballot. So some of that will slowly work its way through, or there's a learning curve to this. So I would say the big ones for the vote by mail, then poll workers, and then redistricting always adds a little bit of confusion, I think, because what it does is, I'm used to looking up who's on my ballot. Like, I think that's a part of the process, but some people just sort of go in and then they see names they haven't heard of. So that's where redistricting was causing some problems, is people were like, wait, I don't know, I don't recognize any of these people. Mm-hmm. So those were the big ones. I'll think if there were a few more, but those were the big ones. Mm-hmm. Oh, I should mention that there were some positives that came out. When I say positive, that means I'm always for voting and for transparency in voting. So the Secretary of State has added pieces to their website where, for example, you can track your mail ballot. So that is a positive from my standpoint. You can go in and see where, it's sort of like, when you order a pizza and you can see where it is in the process. The Secretary of State has that for vote by mail ballots. So that is a positive from my standpoint. The other piece that's positive is that if you moved in without, like, changed counties, but stayed in Texas, you can actually update your voter registration online. And that is new. And, we're supportive of that. Online registration works, in almost all the other states, or one of the few states where the process has to be paper in the end. And but if you've moved within Texas and just want to change your voter registration because you changed, you moved, from Dallas to Tarrant County, you can go online and do that through the Secretary of State, which is the state website. So that's a positive. So we're always happy when they do something that makes it a little easier.
Something I do want to point out, make sure that your voter registration card and your photo ID match. I go by Kathy, but my given name is Catherine. And it hasn't been too much of a problem here lately, but when I renewed my driver's license, I made sure that I renewed my voter registration card with my official given name.
I think it is better to do that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's usually, sometimes the election workers can sort that out, but it is better to have your names match. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But we don't want people not to try to vote. If you have an issue, go try to vote, and then you can sort it out. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Any more?
Right. I don't see any more questions right now. If there aren't any others, well, Barbara, we appreciate you being here today, and I understand that you will be presenting again on April 26th.
Correct.
And this will be a hybrid program. You will still be presenting online, and people can register for that event, but we will also have it broadcast here on the 6th floor at Central Library at 2:00. So you can wander in, sit down, watch the screen, watch Barbara present real time, and we will be recording that one as well. But register to vote and register to watch the League of Women Voters take on the vote.
That'd be great.
All right. Okay. Well.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And we appreciate you being here today. Bye-bye.
Bye.